What's up, everybody? It's Bradley from the Insurance Guys podcast here. I wanted to do something special for you guys. You know, reviews, and specifically 5-star reviews, are literally oxygen to Scott and I. Those are what keeps us going. And we wanted to start rewarding you guys that leave reviews on Apple or any of the other various platforms. So we wanted to do something special where we read a review every week, or at least try to read a review every week. So I'm going to do the first one here. This is from Chad Andrews. Chad says, great resource for agents. They have great chemistry. Insurance is a dry subject, but they manage to make it entertaining. Have picked up a lot of actionable info from listening. Chad, you have no idea how much that means to us. Yes, insurance is the driest subject on the face of the planet, and we are super happy that we are not putting everybody to sleep. Chad, do me a favor, DM me your address in any way possible, and we'll send you something special.
Insurance agents from around the world, welcome to the Insurance Guys podcast. My name is Scott Howell, your fearless host and leader, insurance agency owner and insurance evangelist for I Protect Insurance and Financial Services, based out of Huntsville, Alabama. And before we get started on today's podcast, please help me welcome. He is a 6'3" sophomore from Saraland, Alabama, parade first team All-American, Rivals 5-star recruit. He is a fantastic insurance agent and a great American. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and welcome the incomparable Mr. Bradley Flowers. How are you, Bradley?
I'm great, Scott. How are you today?
I'm fan-supertastic. Guys, we have got a special show for you today. This is probably what, Bradley, the first show in I don't even know how long.
Probably almost a year as far as recording.
Yeah, first show in almost a year that Bradley and I are going to do together.
With no guest.
With no guest. We don't do that very often. I'm excited because these shows that we do together seem to get a lot of good response, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So, Bradley, I got to ask you, the year of our Lord is now 2020, and the clock has turned over. Talk to the audience today. Sit down in my DeLorean, and we're going to go on a very short ride to 2019 and tell us about what happened with Bradley Flowers and Portal Insurance in 2019.
That's a big question. That's a big question. So the last time Scott and I did an episode together with just both of us, we were, I think, announcing that I had opened that. I hadn't told anyone. So we're now, actually a year ago today, I quit my job, quit my old agency.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Can't believe it's been a year. A year in March will be a year from when we actually opened. But, you know, in short, we have done a lot of things right, fortunately. We've done more things right than we've done wrong. We had a goal of X amount of premium, and I don't think premium growth is everything. You know, I'd rather have the most profitable agency than the most premium. Sometimes those two correlate. Sometimes they don't, you know. Now that I've done it a year, I know how to write a crap ton of premium that's not profitable if I wanted to. But when you're a scratch agency with not a lot of money, one of the only things you can measure is premium growth. And so we had a goal of X amount of premium by March 1st of 2020. We hit that in November. So we were ahead of that. And I knew it was a big goal, but I knew that it was very, very doable. And kind of in the back of my head, my goal was actually to do it by the end of the year. This year, our goal is double that in new business, which I think is really doable. You know, I've looked into some really, really good hires. We've got a great team right now. Overall, I mean, things went great. Learned a lot, but I was probably, next to Ryan Hanley, I was probably the most prepared person on the face of the planet to open an independent agency. Right. And you're probably right there too. And I don't mean that arrogantly. I mean, I had essentially had an MBA for 18 months. Talking to the top 50 independent agents in the world.
Right.
So it's good, man. It's good.
So in that process of going through this last year, the trials, the tribulations, the good times and the bad, so how many people did you hire that are no longer? Because I know when you're a scratch agency, and even, you know, most agencies, you know, they hire people leave, people get fired. How much of that did you have this last year?
We had three. I have three that I've hired that really
just didn't work out.
I guess 4, or actually 5. Sorry. The reason I say it like that is I had one person that I hired that are 2 people that I hired that never made it to opening day. One of those still was working for me. One of them just got another job. Wasn't that big of a deal. The other one was kind of working for me before I opened, and we never made it to opening day. I had 3 more that I'd let go that all are great people. All, you know, I would hug. If they walked in the door right now, it would be a warm conversation, but it just wasn't a good fit. And One thing I've learned, and I hope I don't get any criticism for saying this, one of the biggest things I've learned, I like the story of an underdog.
Right.
I used to play a lot of golf. You like to bet on golf and, play your buddy for $1 or whatever. And I always was the guy that I would say, hey, I'll bet you $10 that I can hit the ball on the green from this ridiculous spot. Like I was always that guy. And I'm kind of like that in business too. Like I'll take the short end of the stick, But one thing I've learned with hiring, at least when you don't have any money to burn, is don't try to make somebody something that they're not. Mm-hmm. And don't try to find a diamond in the rough. Just look for the diamonds.
Right.
Like I'm not just making that up to sound good. That's one of the biggest things I've learned this year is like, don't try to find somebody that is, just a bad situation, but is in terms of their job, but is a really, really good person. I mean, if somebody's working, at an agency that you would not have your insurance at, you probably don't need to hire them. So that's kind of been my story with hiring and firing. That being said, I have right now 3 amazing people who are working for me in-house. I have an awesome VA that is a part of our team. And I have 2 external producers that have other jobs, but that happen to be PNC licensed that are writing business for us. So.
Got you. And let's talk a little bit about, obviously with your growth, you hit your sales numbers by November. So that tells me a couple things. Number one, tells me you worked hard this last year and your team worked hard. But talk a little bit about carriers, and obviously you must have the carriers that you need to be successful or you wouldn't have been able to hit your goals, right?
For the most part, yeah.
So did you get the carriers? I assume you did that you needed to get to where you are today.
Yes. So one of the problems we have not had is getting carriers.
Yeah.
I understand the fact that I'm a different situation than a lot of people because I had relationships with some of the carriers at my prior company because we had a lot of brokered business. A lot of carriers listened to the podcast. I had some people vouch for me, some of the relationships we built. So don't think that my experience is going to be the same with yours. But yes, one of the that doesn't mean it wasn't easy, but one of the problems I have not had is getting carriers. I mean, we've had a few bumps in the road. We've got one we got to meet with next week that wanted to wait 6 months. They were open with me, and that's fine. But what you really have to do, and that's the biggest question when you start. That's the biggest question because I talked to one carrier rep before I left, and it was the day before.
Right.
I didn't talk to anybody. And so that's the biggest question I think for somebody going independent is how are we going to get our carrier appointments, and can we do that? How does that work? The biggest thing you have to do is you just have to have a plan. You have to, I talked about in a prior episode, when you hire people, you got to have a value add for them to come work there. You got to have a value add for that carrier, and you've just got to give them a good business reason as to why. And don't be scared to push them a little bit either, So yeah, I mean, it's been relatively better than expected. We honestly have too many, but part of that is where we are located in the United States.
Yeah, coastal.
Being coastal, we have to have specialty carriers for that odd situation. Dauphin Island is a beach area not too far from us. We have to have a carrier that writes Dauphin Island.
Literally an island.
It's an island. We have to have a carrier that'll write business there, and we may only use them once or twice a year, but when we do, it's a big premium.
Right.
So because of that, we have 25, 26 carriers on the personal line side. I would love to be in a, middle of America and have 3 auto carriers and 3 home carriers and everybody fits in, but unfortunately we just don't have that. So that our market kind of tailors to that, but it's been great. We've had some on the commercial side, something I didn't think we were going to be able to compete in. We've written some really big commercial cases, and we're in the running for a lot of other big commercial cases. And thanks to, some of the, the cover wallets of the world and Attune, which is phenomenal. If you're not appointed with Attune, get appointed with Attune. Be happy to make an introduction for you guys.
Now, what's
there.
Attune again?
So Attune, without going into too much detail, Attune is a commercial, I guess they're an MGA technically, but they write an admitted BOP on AIG paper. It's blackboard. And the big thing for me is they'll write 1,000 feet from the coast and inland, which is unheard of here. So it allows us to write some admitted commercial stuff. I actually wrote my insurance through them on my business. Obviously it just renewed, renewed today, actually. And so they're great. They're really easy to work with. So the Attunes, the Cover Wallets, the Bold Penguins have helped us out big time.
Got you.
So,
okay, next question.
sure. I feel like I'm a guest on the Insurance Guys
You
podcast.
are a guest. Next question on the podcast. Goals for 2020.
Okay.
I know you went to the mountains.
Yeah.
Spent a few days recharging the batteries after Christmas.
Yep.
What are your goals for 2020? What do you see in terms of your agency by the end of this year?
So our premium goal, new business goal, is double what it was in 19. So that's number one. Now, that's not just us throwing a big number out there and trying to hit it, which is what we did in 19. Me and my team sat down before I went to the mountains. I went to the mountains and did business planning with my wife. Shout out Laurel. Whoop, whoop. Love you. Would not be here without her. We went to the mountains, or me and my team sat down, and I asked them what their goals were. And their goals kind of correlated with my goals.
Right.
So essentially reverse engineered that or forward engineered that or whatever. And we came up with that goal. We broke it down by, we broke it down. We took the annual goal divided by 12, divided by the number of team members per day, divided by our close ratio. We have about a 40% close ratio.
That's good.
On that, and that's on the low end. That's taking the number of prospects we entered in our system versus the number of people we wrote, which we didn't necessarily talk to every single person that was entering the system, so it's probably more like 60, but taking our close ratio so we know exactly how many quotes per business day that each person has to quote. So we broke it down that, and most of my team, when I told them that, were like, really? That's all we have to do per day? Yeah, that's all you have to do per day in order to hit this massive goal. And if we hit half of it, we'll still be okay. I won't be happy, but we'll be okay. And so that's our goal for new business. Obviously, I want to add a few more really, really, really good agents. We are this close to opening up location number 2, which is someone that's in a situation where they want to open an independent agency, but are having kind of a difficult time. So Portal Insurance location number 2 is coming. It is in a state that is not very, very close to Alabama. So we're going to be nationwide very, very soon, probably Feb 1st by the time you're listening to this. So that's a goal to have maybe 2 or 3 more of those.
That'll be good.
I kind of slacked off in adding referral partners this year, whereas in 18, I really was proactive in adding an additional lender every week. We are going back to that, and not only are we going back to trying to add lenders to our pipeline, but we're going to have a process and a system that we're going to have new people help us implement. You do this, and this. So we're doing that. And the big, I wouldn't say great white buffalo goal, but the big thing that's kind of looming is we want to be agency number 1, customer number 1 for Project Neon. So that's, as far as Portal goes, that's our goals.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Questions
on that?
That's a lot.
It is, but
And Project Neon, why were you, or was there a reason why you weren't part of the beta testing, or did you just not want to be that?
I missed it.
Okay.
I hadn't started my agents. They picked, the beta agencies started getting selected in Elevate of 2018, which you and I actually podcasted the day of Elevate 2018. It was in Ohio that I wasn't even close to opening. So that's why I just missed it. But we're looking at hopping on it very, very early. Obviously there's going to be a cost associated with that.
Yeah.
And that's why we have our big goals. We have to hit certain numbers that we have the cash flow to do that.
Right.
And do certain things that we want to do. Yeah.
So I'll answer some of these questions too, and I can kind of ask them to myself, or you can ask me as well. But
where are you at in your transition? Because talk about nationwide.
Just an overall transitional mode in terms of explaining that. So Nationwide Insurance gave all of their captive agency force, and I don't know what the exact number is. Let's just say it's 4,000 agents. It might be less. It might be a little bit more.
I think I heard 8.
I would be surprised if it's that many. But they gave us 3 different options to transition to independent. The first option has already come and gone. That was July 1st of 2019. And there were a few agents that took that option, but I would say it would probably be less than 10% of the overall agency force, because it was going to cost more and you were going to pay Nationwide directly for your book of business. And then this next drop dead date will be when all nationwide insurance agents go independent. And that date is, I'm sure vendors are got a pencil and paper out right now, circling this on their calendar.
Can I ask you a couple questions about that?
Well, let me finish.
Sorry.
Then we can. That date, the drop dead date for all nationwide agents to go independent is July 1st of 2020. Now, technically, Nationwide is gifting that book of business to the nationwide agency force, and I'm sure people out there listening to this are like, wow, they're just giving it to you? No, they're not. What they've done in order for them to not have a tax ramification relative to gifting that book of business to the agency force is they've provided what is known as option 2 and option 3. Each one of those options has a little bit different verbiage associated with it. Option 2 is more money, that money to be paid to the IRS, Internal Revenue Service. Apparently, when you sign on for option 2, they send you some type of IRS form. I don't know the form number.
It's a gifting thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And you pay, a percentage there. Option 3 is about half of that, but option 3 also has a buyback provision in it, meaning that if you go out and you choose option 3, Nationwide will be able to, if you ever decide to sell your agency, any of the policies that are in force at the time of the signing of the contract, Nationwide will have first right of refusal to buy those policies back at the same percentage that they were given to you when you chose option 3. Most agencies right now, it looks like to me, are leaning heavily towards the option 2 option, which is more money, will cost more money. But I will be interested to see as we close in on the July 1st deadline and people are signing this contract, which one of those options they will choose. I have no idea what that percentage will be in terms of the total agency force, which one of those options they choose. You said you had questions. I just wanted to explain how that was going down and a kind of an overview. I don't want to get too far in the weeds with it.
So I'm curious. We interviewed David McKnight, who's one of our first interviews, who is the author of Power of Zero. And one of the examples that he gives in Power of Zero is Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote is in a house and there's a train coming and the house is on the train tracks. You remember this?
I do.
And Wile E. Coyote pulls the curtain down and thinks that makes the train go away.
Right.
Are there any agents that you think are doing that with this Nationwide deal? B, if someone were to do that, what's going to happen to them?
No, I don't think any agent's doing that.
Definitely some did that for a little while, I bet.
Oh, yeah, but just because it's like studying for a test. You
can only stress about it so much.
Well, you wait to the last minute, obviously, to study for it. I think most agents right now, because we're getting so much correspondence relative to that on a daily basis, probably keeping that front of mind at the beginning of this year. I think most agents are going ahead and make the necessary changes that they need to make and looking at, okay, how are we going to finance this, or what's this going to look like? So I truly do believe most agencies now I will say this, prior to all this happening, there were quite a few agents that had reached that 35 or 40 year mark with a company that did go ahead and do a sale of their agency to an existing Nationwide agency. There were quite a few of those because those guys were just like, look, based on how this thing is shaking out, I'm going to do better to go ahead and take somebody purchasing my agency and go ahead and retire than go through this whole process of buying my book, or not buying it, but having to pay for my book of business. And here I am 70 years old or 65 years old. There was a lot of that went on. I don't know how many were sold, but
a lot of guys went ahead and just retired.
Yeah, went ahead and retired before they had to deal with it, and took an
and that's
kind of
probably
early.
Part of what they wanted too.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. So that's that. So 2019 for me was an up and down year. We had a lot of good things happen. We had a lot of not so good things happen. Go ahead.
I have another question.
Okay.
What's the general consensus amongst the field? Because, a lot of times having worked for a captive carrier, and they implement, say, a piece of technology, right? The more savvy agents know that that's the best way to go, but the overwhelming majority is a lot of agents fussing about that. Like, oh my God, what's the general consensus of the field? Because I say that to say independent may sound great to me and you and all of our listeners, but to an agent that never planned on going independent, it kind of hurts them the most. And because there's a huge learning curve. What's the general consensus for the field? Is it dread? Is it excitement? Is it what's, you know what I mean? On the battle lines, which you are definitely on the battle lines, what's the general consensus?
So the general consensus is a feeling of excitement to be able to go independent.
Okay.
Most agencies, I would say, 90% of agents that are a part of this transition are excited about this. I think there is a sense of a little bit of a fear of the unknown. If you just got, one-on-one with somebody, they'd probably be like, yeah, well, I don't know what I'm going to do about this, and I don't know what I'm going to do about a management system and those kinds of things. I think there is a feeling of, here we are in January, and this goes down in July. I think there are some feelings of untrust.
Yeah.
From the agency force to Nationwide in terms of what's the contract going to be like. There's some examples of the contract out there that you can go find, but I think there's some questioning, is the contract going to change between now and then, or, are they going to tell us everything we need to know? Are they going to, and of course there's probably a group, a segment of the agency force that's not happy about it and thinks that somehow Nationwide screwing everybody. There's always that with any captive carrier force, but I think
there should be. You should be skeptical.
Yeah, that's a good word, skeptical. But overall, I think the feeling's excitement.
What are they doing? And this, we may have to edit this out. But what are they doing? Let's say you have $2 million with Nationwide, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I had a carrier that has $2 million with Nationwide. Or excuse me, if I have a carrier that I have $2 million with, right, that I'm not happy with, it's fair to say there's going to be some folks that are,
mm-hmm.
I'm calling up. I can call a carrier right now.
Mm-hmm.
I can pick up my phone and call one of my reps right now and say, hey, I want 3 more points to roll this.
Right.
And they'll say, okay, and we can start today.
Right.
What are they doing to prevent that from happening?
All of that is spelled out in the contract. And
you cannot roll it? Or
you will not be able to roll your book of business, but
or slowly move it over?
If you have a situation where customers not happy where they are, you will have the opportunity at any given point in time to move policies over. Now, what captive agency carriers and independent carriers can do is every carrier in the United States has what is called a warning report.
Yeah.
Now, they can pull that on Bradley Flowers just like like Nationwide can do to Scott Howell. If Bradley Flowers eats a bad piece of pizza tonight and moves $1 million worth of business in one book roll over from XYZ to XYZ carrier,
right,
they are going to pretty quickly find that out, and Nationwide has that same ability too. And if you just July 2nd book roll the entire Nationwide book to Travelers or something, they're going to find that out. You're going to be in violation of your contract, and I'm not sure what the consequences of that would be, but it would obviously not be good.
But if you're rolling it,
right.
I predict they're going to take a rate decrease to keep that from happening.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's going to happen. Anybody with half a brain in their head would say, okay, you've got, all these agency people that are going to go independent shortly and have lots of different options. You're not going to be able to, raise rates, because obviously that just gives them the opportunity to take, day by day 2 or 3 policies and move them over to another carrier that's more competitive.
Right.
So they're going to have to come out of the gate and be competitive in the market. Yeah,
right.
No question.
That's always intrigued me in regards to that.
Right.
What? So how has, we should have prepared questions for each other. That would have been cool. How has that affected your goals this year? Did you maybe not do as good as you wanted to this year because you're preparing for next year? possibly?
Well, I will say in 2018, the numbers, the amount of premium that was determined for my book of business relative to what I would be paying the Internal Revenue Service, that calculation was done on December the 15th of 2018. 2018.
Okay.
So in the year 2018,
Year of our Lord.
year of our Lord 2018, starting in January, I secretly did not push my agency force that year in personal lines, to which I didn't have to because we didn't have a really good rate that year anyway. I told people that I was close to. I don't know if I told you this or not. I think I did. Well, you may have forgotten this, but I think I even said, look, I'm kind of sitting on coast right now.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to grow too much, because every single policy we sell just adds to the number that I'm going to end up having to pay.
Right.
So on personal, I couldn't stop commercial because we were growing so much in that year. But personal lines, we kind of laid off the throttle that year to make sure that, well, not to make sure, but just I didn't want to have to pay any more than I was going to have to. Now,
Right.
That did not affect 2019. And so in 2019, we ended the year, we grew substantially in premium and commercial lines. In fact, had our best year in commercial lines.
That's great.
And to just be honest with all of our podcast listeners, and Gary Vaynerchuk talking about your insecurities, but we once again completely shit the bed in personal lines.
Really? Well, that's going to change next year.
It needs
this
to.
year.
It's going to have to. So we, for 2018 and 2019, we have completely shit the bed. Part of that is the way that I have our personal lines agency structured. And part of that is just that we had I shouldn't say one. We had 3 or 4 different carriers, but our main carrier was Nationwide. And I can sit here and make a lot of excuses, but the bottom line is this: I don't have the right people in place. People I do have in place to sell personal lines.
You've had a lot of changes too.
Well, they're good at selling to a certain degree, but they also do a lot of service work, and that takes away from their time selling. And so one of my goals in 2020 is to get our personal lines squared away and make sure that I've got agents producing personal lines and doing that full time, and then I've got a service team that's doing our service side of the house, and not letting service work get in the way of people selling, because that's been one of our big problems that we've had.
And I think you can really change that. You can really affect that too once you go independent and you have this freedom. And I don't know about you, but for me, I would be so paranoid the last year and a half that I would do something wrong that they don't like and that get taken from me somehow.
Never think about that.
No?
Never
that's
think
good.
about that. But I don't think about that because, as I said on an earlier podcast we did on business ethics, I tell my people every day, I don't give a damn what we do, but we're always going to do the right thing, whatever that is.
And I don't mean doing something unethical. I just mean we all know how corporate America will just decide they don't like somebody and that kind of thing. But
I don't concern myself with that.
that's
I just
good.
don't. I don't. But see, I'm in a little. You were with a smaller regional
who was
carrier.
very Big Brother-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
Nationwide, we're independent contractors, and they don't really Big Brother us.
And
at
you'd
all.
always hear about agents that got fired for a reason they shouldn't have got fired for, or whatever.
So 2019 was a mixed bag. I will say that, and I've never spoken to this. I've never talked about this. We did make the President's Conference, which is the top 100 agencies in the country, 120 or whatever.
You did that for total production?
Yes, went to Vienna.
Awesome.
Went to Vienna, Austria for 7 days. I got to hear the CEO of Nationwide give his farewell address to the company, which was very interesting. It was a very interesting farewell address. I'll say that. I can't talk much more about it than that.
You're all going independent. I'm out.
Yeah, no. It was good. It was good. But I've never told you this story. The year before that, we made Conference of Champions. I don't know what we're going to do this year for 19. I know we're on target to do Conference of Champions in New York, but may end up going to Hawaii with the President's Conference. I don't know yet. But every time I go to one of those conferences, I have kind of a personality defect that I don't feel like I belong. And that was exasperated by the fact I was with the top 100 agencies in the country. And these guys are the $100 million agencies, the $80 million agencies. So I certainly did not feel like I belonged there. But on Wednesday, we had a formal black tie tuxedo dinner at the President's Palace in Vienna, Austria. And we were on the bus. We were on a bus over there for dinner. And I looked at my wife and I said, you know why I feel like I belong today? And she said, why is that? And I said, because of the 120 agents that are here, I'm the only one that had a podcast come out this morning on life insurance and helped a bunch of damn insurance agents today.
That's right. Yeah.
And for some reason, that resonated with me, and it made me feel better about being there. But the rest of the time, I didn't spend a lot of time with agents while I was there. You know, they're on such a different level playing field than I am. I mean, I got on a bus with a man and his wife at the Vienna airport. They picked us up in a Mercedes Sprinter bus. This husband and wife were sitting across from me. They were probably in their 60s. And he said, we introduced ourselves, and I said, so tell me about your agency. And he said, well, we're up in the Northeast, and we're actually an aggregator broker. We do a lot of about 30% of the agency force that was there were actually exclusive agents, and about it may have been 50%. I don't know. But then the other half,
independents with Nationwide.
That's right.
Okay.
Huge agencies, like huge, Brown and Brown, those kind of guys.
Okay.
And so this guy's sitting there, and he's the president of this agent, this broker or aggregator or whatever the hell it was. And I asked him a couple of questions. Well, we got 300 employees, and for a guy that already doesn't feel like he belongs, to be sitting across from a guy in a Sprinter van that's the president of a 300 employee, probably multi-billion-dollar company, I'm like, and it was a very awkward conversation because I said some things to him like, well, we're a little old bitty small boutique agency in Huntsville, Alabama, and man, I shouldn't even be here, And he said, well, you obviously did something. You're here.
That's right.
So, one thing I did talk a lot about, and it's something I want to do a podcast on in the next not too distant future, is I talked to some of these larger agencies, $100 million, $200 million, $500 million agency owners, about ESOP program. One thing I want to do in the distant future, 20 years from now or less, is when we do get big enough, and I think you have to hit a certain number, whether it's 25 million or 50 million in premium, you can, from a tax standpoint, set your agency up as what is called an ESOP, employee sponsored ownership program. And I talked to a number of agents there that had set that up. And I think in terms of legacy, you want to talk about leaving a legacy. Shit, man, you let, people who've been with you for 10, 15, 20 years buy into the agency and have
kind of like stock options.
Yeah. And let them retire with $1 million or $2 million in their pocket,
Yeah.
I would absolutely love to do that. I briefly talked to a couple of very large agencies like that guy. He was one of them that had set up an ESOP. And to me, that's leaving a legacy, right?
Good way to keep employees too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Buy into the mission.
Absolutely. So that was very special. But, the 2019 was a good year. 2020 is going to be a great year. I'm excited about it. Don't know how I'm going to pay for this yet, but I'm starting the process of working on all that. I guess the last thing that happened to me in 2019 is I had 2 employees with 8 years of experience total with me. One was like a daughter to me that up and left in October. One left on October 15th. The other one left on November 15th.
We need to say that it wasn't because of anything you did.
No, well, no.
I'm saying the way you said that sounded like you run them off. You didn't run them off.
No, they came to me, and maybe it was something I did. When you get to that state where they're leaving, you wonder just how honest they're being with you.
True.
About all that.
Everything's like, as an owner, you have to take everything as your fault, but it doesn't mean that Your actions cause that.
Right. So I will tell you exactly what happened. Don't mind. I'm probably, when Gary Vaynerchuk talked about talking about your insecurities, I was, he has no idea who he was talking to, but I have no problem talking about it. So it was a Friday, I came into our Huntsville office, and one of the girls had been with me for 5 years, and she starts crying, and I said, well, calm down and just, let's talk about what happened. And I thought it was something to do with insurance. I thought she had made a mistake on a policy or something like that. But she said, well, I just wanted to let you know that I've been made a job offer from J. Smith Lanier. J. Smith Lanier's big carrier.
They're like a Brown and Brown.
Yeah, big agency. Right? Yeah. I know they've got offices in Huntsville, Birmingham, Atlanta, some of those kind of places. And they were going to pay her close to $60,000 a year to be a commercial account manager. I think what it was is kind of a renewal type, sales position where she processes renewals, I guess sells them on the renewal, and they were going to pay her $60,000. Well, she had not been happy with the position that she was in with us for about a year. And I knew she was not happy. But when I tested her, and she had sold $200,000 or $300,000 worth of insurance for us the year before. All that was kind of spoon fed to her from myself and my other big commercial agent in my office. She wanted to move into a sales only role, and I knew she was not going to do well in that role. So all of that to say that the mistake I made relative to that situation probably should have been taken care of, or we should have done something about it before then, and I probably should have done a better job testing her and doing all those things before I ever hired her, and we may not have had those problems. But I was unwilling to match what J. Smith Lanier had offered her. And lo and behold, about 3 or 4 weeks later, one of her best friends was also in our agency. She was in the personal lines department. She walks in and she does the exact same thing, and I'm going to J. Smith Lanier, and they're paying me almost double what you're paying me. Now, let me say this, guys. If I've got an A player and they're performing and they're good and they show a lot of initiative and they're selling insurance or they're doing a great job on the service side, I'll fight for you. I'll fight to keep you. I've got people in my agency right now that if they walked in and did that, we would probably have a different discussion. But with those two, I think I felt like it was time for them to go. Yeah. And it kind of made my life a little easier because we were able to then go out and hire what I consider A-level players to replace who was there. And again, those people perform, and 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, they come to me with that kind of offer. If they're performing and they're a big part of our agency, and they're self-reliant, and they have good critical thinking skills, and they're just knocking the bottom out of it, well, I'm probably going to match it, or I'm probably going to do something to try to keep them. But I'm not going to pay the kind of money that these girls were going to make at J. Smith Lanier when I don't feel like they're up to that kind of pay. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of how that went. Now, that was a big blow in October, November. And since that time, during that transition of hiring somebody else to take their place, I have worked probably the hardest I've worked in 3 years in insurance. I've worked every night till 7 o'clock. I have gotten back in the systems and quoted, and I've written business. I've handled billing accounts. I've done everything that any agent listening to this does every single day.
I want to touch on something on that. Talk about, because I think agents need to hear it, with how you handled it with that. Let's take the first one, for example. Yeah. Talk about how you handled it when you were told,
right.
Not how you handled it after, not that you've worked harder, but with that employee, how you treated that employee and how you handled it, because that's something that people need to hear.
Well, I think most people are going to call me or text me and tell me I've absolutely lost my mind. The few people I've told this to have said that you have completely lost your mind.
And I don't know what you did, but I know you and I know what you did.
Yeah. So they came to me both times and they were crying. And when I have people that I love and I care about who are not telling me yet what's going on, but are in that frame of mind, everything in my world slows down. And the first thing I do is I slow down and I tell them to sit down and I say, whatever it is, as long as nobody died, we can take care of it. We can fix it. We can fix it. And so they sit down and they tell me the situation. And the first thing I did is, I think I said something like, well, let me say this. This was to the first one. I wasn't quite as nice about the second one because at that point I felt like I had been kind of undermined, by here's another one of the first one that left kind of going after the second one, But the first one I said, hey, I feel kind of like a proud daddy right now because 5 years ago you were folding T-shirts at Goodies, true story, and here you are getting a $60,000 offer from a large insurance, carrier or agency, and I feel a lot like a proud daddy. And
$60,000 salary in Alabama is really good.
That's strong. That's strong.
Add clarification.
That's strong.
That's equivalent of 120, probably 150 in a Connecticut.
Sure. Yeah, that's strong in Alabama. But so I did feel a sense of pride with the first one that left that I had trained her and done enough to get her to the point where she could have that kind of opportunity. But, I told her I wanted to take the weekend to think about it, and I wanted her to take the weekend to think about it. This was on a Friday, and they were pushing her pretty hard to make a decision. And so I came back on Monday, and I told her that, I think I called her maybe Sunday afternoon because I got tired of thinking about it because I'm like everybody else. When something like that's on my mind, it seems like it's all I can think about. But I called and I said, look, I think you need to take that opportunity. I think it's a great challenge for you. I think it's a great opportunity for you. And I think you need to take it because I'm just, I'm not going to be able to offer that kind of money, which I wasn't going to, like I said, to that particular individual. But I did pay her 2 weeks of severance. I told her that my thought on it was, my wife told me I was crazy too. She said, why in the world somebody quits and you're paying them 2 weeks of severance? But, my thought on that was this is somebody who had been working with me every day for 5 years and done a lot for our agency, had shown up, had always done a serviceable job, had never stolen money, had never done anything that compromised our agency. And I just felt like the right thing to do to make sure that nobody ever felt like I had, given them the short end of the stick or had not been the type of person that they would come to work for, is I went ahead and paid both of them 2 weeks of severance and basically cut them both loose. Told them that, 3 days afterwards would be their last day and they could, take some time off before they started their new job. Now, a lot of agents out there will tell me I'm crazy for doing that, but my theory on that is if somebody's been with you 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, man, that's a long time. And I just felt like it was, in my heart, it was the right thing to do.
You can't fault someone for wanting to better themselves.
Absolutely not. And
whether or not we think it's the right decision,
right?
Who knows? I mean, to them, it may, like let's say somebody were to leave me right now and go to work to pick up trash. If in their head it's them bettering themselves, by God, you cannot fault somebody for doing that.
Absolutely not.
There's a difference between somebody leaving you and somebody leaving you in poaching business and stealing and things like that.
Right.
There's a difference.
And that was another reason I did it.
Yeah.
What was I felt like, if I give this person 2 weeks of severance, they might be less likely to do something to our agency, like take a customer list or do something like that with it. But I felt like it was the right thing to do, and everybody else told me I was insane, that I should have just cut them loose and told them good luck, but I just wasn't going to do that.
Here's the thing. I was in an insurance group recently where somebody was discussing an employee that left to go to work for a competing agency.
Right.
And the person said, that the person had a non-compete,
Right.
had a non-solicit, all
you
that
and I
stuff.
both have dealt with.
And the person was, and I may feel different than this after I've been doing this 20 years. I may be jaded. I don't know. But I'm in this to empower and impact people.
Right.
That's what I'm in this for. And that includes my employees. But this person was in there and they were talking about this employee that left working for a competing agency and should I go after them in a legal sense.
Right.
And I wrote 10 paragraphs to reply to this person. And I don't remember exactly what all I said, but basically I said, look, and this was a personal line situation. And I know everything's situational. I know that if you have a big commercial lines producer that's doing $100,000 a month and the average case size is $64,000, it's a different situation. They could hurt you, but this was a personal line situation, personal sum commercial. And the person leaving was not giving the indication that they were stealing business or anything like that. It was simply to better themselves, right? And I replied and basically said, look, all right, this is a personal line situation, okay? Realistically, how much business could they take from? Right. Realistically, I mean, if you were to lose a case every other month, like no big deal. Realistically, like in a lump sum, in a one time, like how much could you use? I think $100,000.
Right.
$100,000 is probably it. I mean, that one person can physically do. Okay, $100,000. That's going to make you 10, let's say. You're going to spend more than that fighting it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and both of these girls had non-competes with a 60. Yeah. My sister, I come from a family of attorneys. I'm the black sheep, and my sister put together what I call the Massey prenup of a non-compete agreement for my agency that I have all my employees sign. And they also sign a third-party agreement with Nationwide. And I have those non-compete agreements that are 60-mile radius for up to 1 year. But my thing has always been this, Bradley, exactly what you just said. I am never going to keep somebody, even if the agency's 10, 15 miles from me, I don't want to keep somebody from bettering themselves. And I don't think that it would take a very unique situation for me to throw that non-compete out to an attorney and say, hey, go write them a dirty letter,
Right.
I just don't want to do that.
And I told this person, you're going to spend that much fighting it. You might as well pick up the phone and call her and say, hey, look, I'm so happy you're bettering yourself by working at this agency. It's great. Is there any accounts you want to take with you?
Right.
Is there any accounts you want? You want to take your mom? You want to take your dad?
Right.
You want to take your sister? Is there any accounts you want to move?
Yep.
Guess how many more they're going to take over those? They're not going to take any because they're going to be guilted into keeping them. Now, obviously, it's not going to be like that in every case, but if that's the type of person to steal from you after you doing that for them, you should have fired them long before they left.
Absolutely.
And I'm passionate about that.
I know.
But that's just how it is. Sorry.
Yeah. And it
everybody.
Sorry,
everybody.
No, it does hurt that when people like that leave that you're so close to, because man, you're running an agency right now. You probably spend as much time with your people in your office as you do your wife because you're there every day for 7-8 hours together. You're in the trenches. You're talking 3 or 4 times a day. Even when you're not in the office, you're getting phone calls and text messages and Christmas parties. And you spend that much time with somebody for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, man. It's like they're a family member, and it's hard.
It is.
But
tell me this. Let's change gears.
Change
gears?
Please.
What is the biggest thing you've learned, most impactful thing you've learned from the podcast in 2020?
Oh, in 2020?
I mean 2020. Sorry.
I was going to say
2019.
I was going to say I only got 3 to pull from. biggest podcast takeaway from 2019. I would say that the biggest thing I've learned is just how much. This is just an overarching type thing here.
Right.
How much I have to learn.
Yeah.
And how many things I need to change within my agency, which I am desperately trying to do. But what I've done is I've fallen into the trap that you talked about on a previous podcast that I was on with you, and I cannot remember which one it was. It may have been, I believe it was the podcast that you and I did with Jason Cass and Ryan Hanley back in December when you were talking about creating processes and how much easier it is to create processes when you have a new agency versus an agency that's got $6, $7, $8, $10 million in premium. So what's happened with our agency is through the podcast, one of the things I've learned is you've got to have written processes for everything you do in your agency. Well, that is now almost, I won't say impossible because I'm doing it, but we're so far down the road and we're so busy on a day-to-day basis with everything that we have to do that all these changes I need to make in the agency are so much harder to do because I'm so busy during the day that it's hard to create those processes because there's 16 things that need to be done right now today that I'm working on, or customers are calling, or agents are calling, or vendors are calling, and I'm on the phone, or I'm working on this quote, or I'm doing this, and all those things have to be done. And here's a $6-7 million agency that I've got that we up until probably July of this year did not have any written processes in place. It was just a free for all. It was like, everybody just kind of did what they knew what to do, but there weren't any written processes as far as how to do anything. And so that's probably the thing that I have struggled with the most, and the thing that is taking me the most time because, like you said, I'm trying to do it on the back end instead of doing it on the front end. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
That's one thing. And then it seems like every podcast guest that we have, and I think this segues nicely into something I wanted to talk about in front of our audience, because I feel like they are so much a part of what we do in terms of our audience and the people that listen to this podcast, is I wanted to talk a little bit about our goals for the podcast in 2020.
Yep.
And one of the things, this is probably a bad example because the dynasty is now probably more than likely over. But I want to create the dynasty that the New England Patriots have had for the last 10 years.
Tom Brady announced that he was coming back while we were on this podcast, by the way.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's what I've been over here doing.
Well, I want this podcast to be that. So for our listening audience, Bradley and I haven't talked about this. This is the first time we've talked about this. But I think in order to do that, what we have to do to continue to grow as a podcast is we have to schedule the very best guests that we can that create the most value for the people that listen to this podcast. And one of the changes I want to see us make for this year, last year it was some different things that we did, but this year I want Bradley and I to get on a 10-minute call a month prior to us batch filing the podcast and go through 10 topics. Let's say we're going to do 10 podcasts, right? 10 podcasts gets batch filed. We have 10 topics that we want to discuss that hopefully have not been discussed on the podcast. Could be a lot of different things. And then from those 10 topics go, all right, who's the best in the industry at that?
The most, yeah, right.
And then go after that person. And if you can't get them, then I'll call them. If I can't get them, we'll get one of these big agencies to call them and say, look, guys, whether it's the Warren Barhorse of the world or the guy that's the best in the world at surety and crime policies or, QuickBooks and just a lot of different topics that we've never covered before, because I think the way we grow this podcast and continue to create value for agents out there is to every week get the best of the best in here to talk about what they do. And by doing that, the unintended consequence is you and I grow as people and agency owners, because, there's a lot of things I don't know a lot about in the insurance business. That will benefit our audience. It'll benefit us, and it will allow us to continue to grow. I think the overall format of the podcast is probably been good. I texted you last night. I'm like, hey man, are you thinking about going to 30-minute podcast? And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, if you had come back and said yes, which he did not, I thought, I don't know how I'm going to get
all that in there.
In that 30-minute span between the intro and us telling the story, and
we like I said, we batch these, and every now and then we get one where we have to cut it short.
Right.
And to keep that person from getting offended, I always schedule them 30 to 45 minutes depending on the day, and then we just go long essentially. But who's your favorite guest this year? And that's a hard question.
Oh, shoot. That's like asking who your favorite kid was. You know me. I love big personalities.
Yeah.
Because they match my energy on the podcast.
Yeah.
And this was somebody that I would love to have back on the show this year, just because his podcast was probably the shortest podcast we've ever done. But I'm going to give you two names of people, and I don't even know if we had one of these guys on the podcast in 2019. But my two favorite guests that I think we've interviewed are probably the coach, the business coach Burt.
Coach Burt, yeah.
It was a 10-minute podcast. It was super short.
That was your fault.
It was. But I would like to get him back on to talk for another hour this year at some point about just, coaching and people. And I love his energy. I love people that we get on the podcast that are that sales-oriented person that has a big personality.
I'm scrolling through the feed to see who mine was. And
then the other person that I would love to get back on the podcast again this year and talk a lot more, and I want to do this to help him June, July, August timeframe, is Mike Stromso.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Because
when you said me, my mind said
yeah. Mike, for some reason, and it has nothing to do with any of the other guests, they've all been fantastic. But for some reason, what Mike says really resonates with me, the way he says it. And we've had people reach out to us and talk about getting him back on the podcast and just cutting him loose for 2 hours. And I want to do that in a way that enables us to promote the UPP for him for this upcoming year, obviously free of charge. I think agents, when they hear Mike speak,
Mike should just bring us in to speak, and that would take care of that.
Well, I don't know that that'll happen. Mike's kind of a control guy, and that's one thing about him I know. But he's just a dynamic speaker, and the things when he spits gold, he spits gold. I mean, you could sit there. I listen to his UPP podcast all the time.
Me too. It's a good podcast.
It's great. It's fantastic.
His book is probably the only book that, and it's not a short book.
Right.
It's a normal size book. 200 or 300 pages.
Right.
Have you read his book?
No.
It's the only book. I'm not a huge reader. I force myself to read, but I'm not a huge reader. His book is the only book that both times I have read it, it was start to finish. I didn't put it down.
I believe
4 hours.
I believe it.
Because it's nothing but very actionable things. Mine, I have a hard time because I don't want to say Gary Vaynerchuk, but I have to say that, and it's not because, of course you're going to say Gary Vaynerchuk. It's because I know how much time, effort, and energy we put in.
Right.
People listening to this don't know.
Right.
I mean, that was a year and a half of just trying to get that, make that happen. So I'm going to say that just because I know what we put into it. So I'm going to shift gears to what top 3 best moments this year? Life, business, podcast, like the top 3 best things that happened to you, and don't go all lovey-dovey on just the top 3, coolest,
So top moment for 2019 for Scott Howell. I'll go 3-1. I'll go 3-1.
3-1 was.
I'll go from number 3 and then down to my number 1.
Okay.
Number 3 was you and I, and you will never forget this, although you were worried about your damn water bill when it happened. But when you and I were walking across the catwalk to go out on stage at 8% Nation, and we had security with us, and the music was playing, and everybody was up clapping and all that crazy stuff, that I just remember for a brief second looking around and going, damn.
I know.
What are two guys from Alabama doing?
I'll tell you something, man. All these insurance conferences should go to 8% from a production standpoint.
Yes.
It's like a rock concert.
It is.
And it wasn't just because of the venue. It was like that last year.
Right.
They should go from a production standpoint.
Right. Number 2 was the Gary Vaynerchuk podcast and being able to be in his office that day. That was a very special moment for me because I just sat there thinking, what are 2 kids from, Hamilton, Alabama, and where you grew up sitting in Gary Vaynerchuk's office right now, And then my number one moment of 2019 is I got married on January 24th, and it was only my wife and I. Nobody else was there. There were no witnesses other than the people that did the wedding. But as we got married and we stepped outside to go get our pictures made, it started snowing in Gatlinburg. So our pictures, if you ever see any of them, you can see the snow falling as we're taking pictures of us right after the wedding. And
cool.
that was really special.
That's awesome.
What about you?
You know, man, I had a lot of good crap this year.
I know.
I had a lot of good stuff, especially business-wise. Probably number 3, I'm going to say, was probably the Gary Vaynerchuk podcast. I've got to put that one up there. Number 2 is probably September, October-ish. I can't pinpoint a day of my agency because doing it the way that I'm doing it with hiring people, you know it's going to be a long time before you see the bank account go up, not down. And September, October was when I finally was kind of like, okay, this is going to work.
Yeah, I got this.
This is going to work.
And I'm not going to have to file for bankruptcy.
That's when, I've never had that feeling like worst case scenario, we can figure this out.
Right.
I mean, I don't have any investors. I don't have a loan. Like there's things I could do if I needed to.
Right.
So I never really worried about that. And especially now with the business we've written, it's going to be okay. But as far as like, that was when it was kind of like, okay, that's when we started getting the right team in place. It just, that's kind of, that would be number 2. Number 1 would be Agent 2021 for several reasons. One of those being that's when things started getting real with the podcast. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. You know what I mean? But I equate Agent 2021. I had a lot of good stuff going on in my life around that time. Outside of like around that whole time. That was right after that. The Agent 2021 for me was a year ago in 2 weeks. Unfortunately, I don't think they're having it this year. That was right when I quit my job, and I was like, I felt free, So that was kind of just a really good time, And I would say 1.1 would probably be going to Cuba for a lot of reasons. One, it's an awesome trip if you ever have a chance to go, and then 2, just being grateful for what we have, So that would be mine, man.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was a crazy 2019. I look forward to 2020. I think one advantage that you and I both have is we and our spouses love to travel.
Yep.
Now, my wife, and I can't speak for Laurel, but my wife is one of those people that after about 5 or 6 days, usually she's ready to come home. Yeah. And I'm a little bit like that myself. I think this year for us with traveling and going to these different state association meetings and speaking and talking and
that's the
podcasting.
Coolest thing, man.
Yeah. We've got the Arkansas, and then we've got
PIA of Arkansas. We're going to be at. Shout out to those guys. That's actually in Memphis. It's funny. You told an Elvis story earlier.
Yeah.
That event is at Graceland.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Las Vegas. We're going to Vegas. Keystone Insurance Group in less than a month. Actually, a month today, I think, is when we're going to be there. Always love an excuse to go to Vegas. We've got, I'm doing Ohio. We've had a lot more reach out to us. And that's like the coolest thing. Guys, here's the thing. Like this whole like traveling and speaking thing, if you're not getting John Maxwell money, it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going, you're going to, you're in Atlanta airport. It's 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And you're not eating good. You're missing the gym.
Right.
It's, and you're not making any money. I mean, I think, it's just, you're making money, and obviously you're appreciative of them paying you if they are paying you. But there's a lot of suck around that.
Yeah, there is.
But it is so freaking cool being able to talk to agents and learn what is going on in the field.
Right.
But also be able to say, I know exactly what you're going through because I'm going through the same thing.
Right.
Meeting the people in the IA community that have listened to the podcast that we've talked to. That is probably the best thing that's come from this. It sounds like we're quitting the podcast the way we're talking, but that has probably been the best thing that has come from this podcast.
I would agree.
Is just getting the opportunity to travel to these places and meet these cool people and to feel like you have any kind of little bitty influence on the industry in any degree is really, really, really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And we've met a ton of freaking great people, man.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm going to go ahead and shut this thing down. I haven't had lunch today. Bradley's probably got to go home and deal with kids and business and everything else. So
I got to go to dance practice.
Dance practice tonight. That'll be amazing. Guys, I think I want to close this out by telling all of you how much we love you and how much we appreciate you. It's been a hell of a 2019, and it's going to be a great 2020, and we just appreciate everybody's support and their love. If there's anything we can do for you, let us know. But as I always end every podcast, get your ass out from behind that desk today. You can have all the management systems and technology and tech stacks and AI and all this other shit, but this business is all about relationships and getting to know people and loving them up. And get out there today and go sell some insurance for your wife and your husband and your kids and your parents and make money for those people and enjoy the ride, because one day it'll all be over with. And for some of us, it'll be over with before others. But enjoy it and love it. Try to minimize all the cynicism that you can get from it, because we all have that from time to time. And it's hard some days, and we understand that. But make money for your family, write good business for the agencies that you represent, and write good business for the companies that you represent. Bradley Flowers, I love you, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it, guys.
Guys, we love you, and we'll talk to you soon on the next episode of the Insurance Guys Podcast. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Insurance Guys Podcast. If you need to know more about me or you need to get in touch with Scott, you can always reach me at theinsuranceguyonline.com or email me at iprotectins@gmail.com. And if you need to get in touch with Mr. Bradley Flowers, go to bradleyflowersinsurance.com or email him at bradley@saralandinsurance.com. Guys, we love you. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to being with you again real soon on the next episode of The Insurance Guys. Take care.